I had one awesome awakening. Oh, hi, Jake. I was in your garage the other night. But I do want to thank you for coming out tonight. It means so much to me. You know, I've only shared before I came to Pennsylvania twice. So this is very, very fresh. I couldn't even talk about it. And if someone told me 7 months ago that I would be in Pennsylvania with my face up next to an image of Christ, sharing my experience, I would have said, I don't know what you're drinking, but I don't want any of it. And yet, here I am. So, in 2009, I woke up one Saturday morning, and you know when you go to sleep, and you sleep on your arm or your leg, and it's tingling and it feels like it's asleep? But both my hands and both my feet felt like that. And I thought, how on earth did I sleep on all four limbs at once? As the day wore on, I got really, really ill. I started to stumble around. My wife's a nurse. She took me in the hospital. They said, you've got the flu, go home. So I went home. And Monday came, and I went to see my family doctor. And he said, you got the flu, go home. By the third day, I was really, really ill. I went in there again, and he was slightly angry that I bothered him again. And I know, those of you in the medical field, you know, medicine is an imprecise science. But I was really sick. Finally, I went back in, and Lorraine said, I'll meet you at the doctor's office, and they've got to see you. And I fell in the parking lot. And they carried me in and up to his office. Finally, I got his attention. So he made an appointment for me with a neurologist. By now, another couple of days had gone by. And finally, I got to see Dr. Shafiq. And he examined me quickly, and he said, I'm admitting you right away to the hospital. And I said, well, what do you think this is? He said, well, it could be MS, multiple sclerosis. I knew that wasn't good. Or he said, it could be a rare disease called Guillain-Barré. We're going to do tests right away. And an hour later, I was getting all the tests, and he was there. And then he came back in and he said, Jim, I want to do a lumbar puncture on you. I don't know how many have had one of those. The needle's about that long. Something you'd use on a horse. Yeah. And I kind of flinched and assumed the position of, you know, laying like a baby. And they inserted that into my spine. What they were looking for is a sure marker of Guillain-Barré is an elevated protein level in your spinal fluid. And in an hour, he came back in, and he had a really angry look on his face. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, there's the vial. It's cloudy. Jim, you have Guillain-Barré. But he said, I'm afraid, my friend, that you are condemned to a life of pain. And, you know, at that point, I was in hospital, I was medicated, I didn't feel that bad. But so that was 2009. 2010, 2011, I was trying to, in the meantime, I had a couple of companies, manufacturing companies. And as the years rolled by, I got sicker and sicker and could do less and less. So fast forward to April of this year. And by this time, I had tried every medication in the book. I'd gone to London, England to see specialists. I'd been everywhere. I would get out of bed in the morning by rolling and falling onto the floor. And then when I got enough strength, pull myself up to a standing position and wait again until I could move my feet. And the pain was overwhelming. And I look back now and never once did I ask God for help. The arrogance, the sheer arrogance that I had was overwhelming. Oh, I'll beat this, you know. Well, I didn't. The only thing that And it's important for you to know I never ever used or abused drugs. I mean, as a pilot, well, I wouldn't anyway. My idea of getting high was going up 30,000 feet. But I just was so sick, and I was sick of being sick. I was literally out of my mind with pain. And I took an overdose of narcotics. And I died. I died. Subsequent to all this, I found out that I was not even found for 12 hours. No brain sign, no pulse, nothing. Absolute flatline. But here my journey begins. And so, bear with me, because this is hard for me to talk about. The last thing I remember as I slipped over the edge was 3 words. God, forgive me. 3 simple words that saved my life. And it's true what they say, a classic tunnel. And I'm going 1,000 miles an hour. I'm horizontal, laying down, feet first. And tremendous sensation of speed, but no wind. No wind. But just knowing you're traveling. Light and dark, like a cloudy tunnel. And I was conscious. I can remember everything that I thought. Everything that I thought. And I remember thinking, what have I done? What have I done? Left my wife, my kids. Before I could think much else, I started to slow down, and as I came to the end, I was upright. And I stepped out and looked down onto grass. The most brilliant, beautiful green grass you could ever imagine. And I looked up, and everything was misty and foggy. And I could sense to my left a darkness. If you've ever been to England and caught in one of those pea soup fogs, that's what it was like. And cold and clammy. And just a place you wouldn't want to be. I could hear from the darkness mumbling, like there was someone in another room. We've all heard that, where you're not sure what's going on, and you know there's people in there, but you can't tell what they're saying. And instinctively, I kept turning to the light. And the more I turned to the light, the more the mumbling increased, and I then began to hear my name being whispered. James, come this way, over here. We have to talk to you. This way. It just didn't sound right. So I moved more to the right, and the more to the light that I moved, the more insistent that became. You know what that was. And now I began to get scared. I began to get really scared. And then I started to walk toward the light. And then I could feel even more insistent, like something pulling at my shoulder, and I didn't want to turn around and see what it was. And then I said 3 more very important words. God, help me. And as I said that, the light behind the mist of that beautiful Pennsylvania morning became lighter. And I looked and I could see 3 points like stars. One here, one here, and one here. Now when you're a pilot, you're trained to have good spatial reference, so that if you lose your altimeter, you can guesstimate how long it is before you're going to hit the ground. So you head to the back of the plane. You never hear of a plane backing into a mountain. I had to use a little humor to get me through this. And as I looked, those 3 points of light were coming toward me on probably a 65-degree angle toward me. And as they came toward me, the light got brighter, and then I could see they had a human form. And I remember saying to myself, are these angels? And folks, they were. They were. And they were gliding down. And as they got nearer, as I said, I'm good at being able to tell distances and so on. They were big. The shortest one was about 10 feet tall. The other one was probably 13, and the other one was about 15 feet tall. And I couldn't see their faces. You know what it's like on a hot day in Pennsylvania? You're going on the road, and the sun's hitting the road, and the shimmer effect comes up in front of your car. Their faces were covered with that. It was covered with the shimmer. But let me tell you how they looked. They had the classic robes on. The robes glowed, and the hems of their robes turned into mist. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. The tallest angel and the last one that glided down clearly was in charge. He had a pendant around his neck, and he just seemed more dignified and clearly in charge. And you could tell the other angels deferred to him. And he had this half-moon medallion on a chain, and there were what looked like hieroglyphics or ancient, I don't know if it was Aramaic or Hebrew, I don't know. But clearly he was a person of importance. All angels are important. And as you can imagine, I'm just mystified. And they came toward me, and the first angel, and all of a sudden, the shimmer disappeared. And I saw the most incredibly beautiful face. Neither male nor female. I think the best of all of us. Very, very light, almost white hair. And eyes that were between blue and purple. Now I know that's going to sound strange, but that's how deep their eyes were. And as he glided toward me, he smiled at me. The most glorious smile, the most incredible warmth, and a feeling that they were genuinely happy to see me. They didn't have wings that we've all seen in pictures with the outline of feathers. But what they had was like spires of light that came up from the back of their shoulders. And that just glistened all the time and kind of wavered. And the angel came up to me, smiling, and he came up and came to this side of me, and he took my arm. And what a feeling to be touched by an angel. And I noticed when he touched me, light came from his hand onto my shoulder, onto my arm. then I heard him speak to me. His lips didn't move, but I heard his voice. He said, "Do not be afraid. We are your friends." And then he reached out his arm, and I was hugged by an angel. Hugged by an angel. I cannot describe. It's like being hugged by 100 grandmothers. You just feel the love and the warmth. And he just wanted me to feel safe and secure. And I touched him. And when I drew my hand back, light came from his hand onto mine. It drew back, and then it let go and went back to his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to tell you, the love of God is sticky. The love of God is sticky. I'm willing to bet you've never heard that in church before. It was wonderful. I'm in awe of what's going on. In the meantime, the other two angels glide toward me, and the tallest one, clearly in charge, and they were so polite. They were so polite. The tallest one came in front of me, and he didn't say, "Come this way." He didn't say, "Over here." He said, would you walk with us? How polite. Would you walk with us? Are you kidding? Of course. I didn't say that, but I was so thrilled. So as we began to walk a path, and ladies and gentlemen, heaven, how does the prayer go? On earth as it is in heaven. You know why? It is just like here, but 1,000 times more beautiful, 1,000 times more thrilling, 1,000 times more light. Let me tell you what heaven looks like. There is no sun. You have this incredible vault of blue sky, of Pennsylvania morning sky. No sun. Light radiates from everything. Light radiates from everything. And again, as I walked, I saw every footprint I made, the grass lit up underneath my feet in a kind of a flash. They were gliding, so they weren't making any footprints. And as I walked along, the flowers are incredible. My grandmother, God bless her, she loved flowers, and the flowers were everywhere along that path and through the trees and in the woods. But the most incredible thing, there were so many of them, it was like you couldn't discern one from the other, but the color was there. And then I stopped, and the angel pointed down, because he knew what I was thinking, and I could see that why I couldn't make out the outline of the flowers. The petals are all translucent. You can see through them like stained glass. And so that creates, you'd have red upon yellow, upon blue, upon green, upon azure, upon topaz. The most incredible mixture of colors that you could ever possibly imagine. And the light playing through them. You know, the light coming out of them. And the trees gently swaying, the softest of breezes, of warm breezes. Just such a beautiful thing. And I sensed, when I heard the rustle of the wind in the trees and in the flowers, it all seemed to join together to form a heavenly music. Not music like anything I'd ever heard, but everything kind of went together. And I mean, like you said, Doug, how do you describe, when you describe something, you try to compare it to something. There's nothing to compare it to. Nothing to compare it to. So I struggled with this, but it was beautiful. But I began to realize, and then one of the angels said to me, "Listen to the flowers." Isn't that beautiful? Listen to the flowers. And as I did, as he asked me to do that, I realized that the wind and the rustle of the trees and the gentle movement of the flowers all combined to create a harmony of praise. And it was flowing in one direction. And I wasn't told this, but I think it was flowing to the throne of God. Flowing to the throne of God. And even myself, I felt a magnetic pull, sort of at a 75-degree angle. And it was like everything that I was witnessing was moving that way. We walked along, and as I walked, something different was happening. They were talking to me, and I was asking questions. But at the same time, I felt this, and I hate to use this word because it's just too darn modern, but I felt like I was being downloaded with all this information, all this knowledge, and how things looked and worked. And at the same time, we were conversing. I was conversing with the angels. I found out later what that was. So we walked along, and everywhere I looked, and I could see in the distance, more of, I could hear a brook glistening and see a brook glistening. And we came up a gentle slope, and there was a split rail fence. A split rail fence. And I think they gave him to me because he was the shortest angel. And he said, "James, look." And I looked, and there was a beautiful pasture. And as I looked, cantering toward me were three of the most beautiful horses I had ever seen, tossing their heads like horses do when they're happy. And we've been fortunate enough to have Arabian horses in our life and quarter horses, Jim. And I was just so blessed. I think God, to make you feel comfortable, as I said earlier, puts things in front of you in heaven that you loved on earth. He's that kind of a caring, loving, gentle God. And so I was thrilled. And they cantered up to the fence, and two of them started to graze. Didn't see any manure. Thank you, God. One of them put his head over the fence and nuzzled my chest. And I put my hand out and stroked his ears and the side of his neck and scratched him away. And his coat was so perfect. I'd never been able to groom a horse like that in my life. And he had light coming out of his coat, just like the angels. And the same thing happened again. That sticky glove of God came off the horse and stuck to my hand. And I smoothed him back, and it went back in. And the intelligence of the animals was something. You know that they have a soul. And so I'm so thrilled with this. I'm just overwhelmed with the beauty and the kindness of the angels, and to be able to see something that I loved close by, and this overwhelming feeling that I had come home, that I had been wandering all my life, and I had finally come home. Ladies and gentlemen, you have nothing to fear if you walk in the light of Christ. Nothing to fear. What we call earth is a transitory phase, and it means nothing in the sense of where we are eventually going to go. It means a lot in the sense of we are entrusted to care for our loved ones and to live out a life on this earth as best we can. It is the mission that God has given us. But when you're in heaven, you are at home. Okay? And it feels like Christmas all wrapped up in 1 hour. You know? And so we're talking, and I can see in the background some beautiful tall Gothic columns, like you'd see in Greece. at the Parthenon or something like that, and they shone, and light was coming from them. Light came from everything. And, I had this overwhelming feeling that this was all meant to be. I may have felt that I died by accident, but it was God's will. And at that time, I didn't know to what end. As I looked, and the small angel kept speaking with me, small, and then I became aware of another presence. And I turned, and the tall angel with the medallion was standing with his head bowed, his hands out, and he had a book in his hands, a slim book. And standing looking down at the book, in profile to me, but his face covered in shimmer, was the most noble, incredible creature I could ever imagine. And right away, I knew it was Jesus. He had a close-cropped beard, very tall, elegant. He had this, and he radiated light that, as beautiful as the angels were, it was 1,000 times brighter. But I could look at it. If you looked at something like that here, you couldn't stand it. But I could see the light coming from it. His hair wasn't long. It was longish, but it kind of curled over the back of his collar. And the angel, I think, felt and I started to get weak in my knees. And I remember kind of doing this, and the angels reached and held me up. Then one of the angels brought my attention back and said, "Look." And I looked across that pasture, and there was another fence on the far side, up the hill. And I could see 3 horses up there. And it was a white and a gray and a bay. Then I became aware of a sound, and I turned again, and again, Jesus was in profile to me. And then he looked up and looked at the angel in front of him and gave a slight nod and turned toward me. And when he did, the shimmer went from his face, and I saw the most incredibly beautiful, kind face you could ever hope to see. And his eyes, ladies and gentlemen, his eyes, so beautiful and blue and gray and misty. And in those eyes you could sense the unconditional love. You could sense the sadness for the hurt that I caused him. And then he smiled at me. Jesus smiled at me. Someone who didn't deserve anything from him. But I had asked him to forgive me, and I had asked him to help me. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, I believe with all my heart that even a sinner, if they come to Christ, No, it isn't an automatic thing. You have to feel it from the depths of your soul, and He knows it. But if you are 1,000% sorry, He will help you, and He will guide you, and He will accept you. Jesus compels us to love Him. He compels us to love Him. But He doesn't command us. Because He gave us free will. That's why there is so much tragedy in the world. So much evil. He gave us free will. So He doesn't command us. But Christ compels us to love Him. And I felt the most compelling pull of my existence. And I committed my heart entirely to Him from that second on. He looked like he had a really good tan. No, he wasn't really dark-skinned, you know. But he just radiated. And I got this feeling. I just got this feeling that Jesus has a real sense of humor. And I mean, He must have. He created the world. But I think, you know how you feel that this is someone you can talk to? That's the feeling I had. And you're all going to have that conversation with Him, ladies and gentlemen. You're all going to see what I saw if you continue to walk in the light and the love of Jesus Christ. It is my most fervent wish from the bottom of my heart for every one of you that you get to see what I was so privileged to see. Me. I mean, I ask myself every hour of every day, why me? I wasn't a bad man, but I sure wasn't up for sainthood. And here I am standing face to face with Jesus. And he was continuing to read, and I can only assume it was the book of my life. And as I walk this new walk, I have Luke to read, to tell me about the Scriptures. You know, I mean, but the only thing I ever knew was, lead me not into temptation, for I can find the way myself. I don't think that's in the Bible. But Luke, God bless him, has gone on to explain how some of the, a lot of the biblical references to what I saw. And then I heard in my head again that melodious, clear, deep voice. James. And I turned around, and both the angels put their hands in their robes and backed away. And he smiled at me, and he raised his hand. And I looked, and I thought he was waving at me and smiling. And when he did, his cloak slipped back from his arm, and right here in the wrist, a bloody hole in the wrist. And as you would do when someone waves to you and smiles at you, I started to step toward him. And the wave turned into a command. And an incredible voice that I will never forget said, James, this is not yet your time, my son. Go back to Lorraine. And my heart just fell. My heart just fell because I was home and I started to say, please don't send me back. Please let me stay in your light. Let me see the rest of heaven. And the angels started to turn me around, very gently, but clearly turned me around. And they started to move me forward back down the path. And I kept looking back over my shoulder to have one last glimpse of that beautiful, loving, compassionate, unconditional love that flowed from him. And when I finally turned around, he was gone. And I started to beg the angels, please, please help me. I'm in the tunnel, horizontal, going 1,000,000 miles an hour. Totally, completely, emotionally wiped out. Because I did not want to come back to the muddy world of the earth. As beautiful as it is here. Mine eyes had seen the glory.
Amen.
I looked, and at the end of the tunnel was a face that I didn't recognize. And it was yelling at me. I knew I was back. And on top of that, it hurt. Someone was slapping me. I popped at the end, and it was the head of the intensive care unit shouting at me, Jim, wake up, wake up. Because a minute before, they had all been gathered in the nurse's station. I had been wheeled off to a corner room, still hooked to a respirator, for one reason. What a terrible term they used. Because they were waiting for my children to come from the west coast of Canada. And he told me after, we left you on the respirator to keep you fresh. He just poked me in the fridge. And then I had another battle. I had developed a raging case of pneumonia, collapsed lung, and the other lung full of pneumonia. And it was during that 3 or 4 days of drifting in and out. But slowly but surely, I got better. Hallelujah. And I'm an analytical person. And I wondered, as I got to where my thought process, and they finally took the tubes out of me, and my voice was so hoarse, no one could understand me. But I kept trying to go over my mind what I had just seen. It was so incredible that I just couldn't absorb it all. But slowly I got better. They moved me after 7 days from intensive care to a step-down unit. And I began to recognize my family and friends, although I still couldn't speak. But in my mind, as I lay there in the darkness at night, you could imagine how I was trying to come to grips with what I had just seen. Had I imagined it? Was this just drug-induced? It was a few days later when the doctor came in and he said, I'd like to speak with you. And he updated me on my condition and how important it was for me to do lung exercises and so on. And then he said, he said, I've been an intensive care doctor for 17 years, and there is no medical reason why you are alive. But I knew why I was alive.
Amen.
And I'd love to tell you that Jesus said, go back and start a church or something like that. He didn't. But, so I struggled with what label to put on myself. And finally I came up with it the other night. I'm a traveler. That's all I am. But I'm a traveler that has seen what so few people have been privileged to see. And I pray for all of you that you get to experience, and I know you will. But it is so important for you to, whether you've been a believer all your life or you're new to it, that you adhere to listening to your pastors, gathering in church. So let me tell you a few other sidebars of what I learned. As I stood there at the fence with the angels, I saw these streaks going up through the sky. And I don't think I'd prayed since I was an altar boy, and only because I was paid for it. We paid me back then. We got 25 cents a mass.
Okay.
What the angel told me I was seeing was prayers for me. Prayers for me. So when I got back home and I started to get the bits and pieces, when my wife had gotten the news that I had passed, my sister-in-law is a prayer warrior, and she's been praying for me all her life. And God bless them, they gathered their arms around and formed a prayer circle. And they prayed and prayed and prayed that God would reverse my death. And the angels told me, we have lost, in general, the earth has lost the importance of prayer. And so you see these things climbing up, and they look like contrails from a jet. We've all seen those. But what fascinated me is when you see contrails, and I've left enough of them in the sky, they follow the curvature of the earth. But these were straight up. And they were the prayers of my family for me. If you're at the bedside of a loved one, I was told this, pray and get as many people together as you can to pray, a prayer chain. And continue to pray for at least an hour after their death. Now, I know doctors would say, you're crazy. No, I don't care. The angel told me. Who do you think I'm going to believe? You know why? People that die tragically and are suddenly thrust out of their bodies, they're lost. They're between worlds. Now, that's not ghosts, and I'm not going there. I'm just talking about souls. And they told me that it is so important to continue to pray and have 2 people or 3 people talking continuously to your loved one. Because as they leave the earth, it's hard for them to part with the body they've always known. And so hearing the loved one saying, it is okay to go. It is your time. Go, enjoy, and try to be joyful through the tears of losing your loved ones. Because they have the advantage over you. And they're just going to prepare a place for you. And they will be there to greet you. So prayer, ladies and gentlemen, coming to your house of worship and gathering as a group like you have tonight is so important. This kind of gathering creates a huge prayer lift to heaven. It changes the frequency between the veils. And the angels seem to be so disappointed that prayer is not as often done as it should be. Amen. So remember that. And try to remember to stay with your loved ones for at least an hour after they pass. They can still hear you. And gradually, your voice, and it'll help them as they go on the tunnel. I had no one. I had died alone. And it was a terrifying journey. But if they can hear you encouraging them from behind, then they will see the light and they will hear the call of God. So important. A couple of other little tidbits of heaven. No glasses. No canes. God bless you. No wheelchairs. God gives all of us challenges in life. But this dear soul needs our prayer. He has a special place in heaven for those afflicted with this, for those who are dying of cancer, for the loved ones who, for whatever reason, are suffering from depression and every other kind of ailment. It is so important to pray, ladies and gentlemen, and to listen to your pastors and to gather, as I said, as a group, so that your prayers join together and are uplifted to heaven. And they will see, and they will listen. And we all pray for healing on earth, and it happens sometimes. Pastors have seen it. But you know something? Luke said something wonderful the other night. We were privileged to be at the bedside of a dying girl, dying of a raging, most terrible form of cancer. 24 years old. And she loved her horse and loved the barrel race. And we were at Pastor Weaver's service, and he happened to be streaming the service to the internet. And the parents saw my testimony. And as I'm on the altar, Pastor Melvin was back there, it was away in Melvin, gets a text from the parents of this dying girl. Would I come and talk to her about heaven? As fast as Luke and I could fire up that truck and trailer, we were gone. And we went over and we walked in, and they had her bed in the living room. And there was this beautiful little girl who at one time was so vigorous and so healthy, and who loved horses, racked with pain. And as I knelt by her bed, I took her dear, sweet face in my hands. I got this, I'd never felt it before, this tightening in my chest, and the pain in my abdomen. And then her dad said that the cancer had spread to her lungs, and she had a tumor the size of a football in her stomach. Completely inoperable. They'd sent her home from hospice to die at home. And I got up and held her face, and I started to tell her what I told you tonight. And her face was pain-racked. I mean, she was rocking back and forth, right, with pain. And as I started to tell her about seeing the horses, her eyes opened just a tiny bit. And she looked into mine, and I knew she had heard me. And she settled back into her mommy's arms. And the next day, she died. When Luke and I came down here from Canada, we dragged my horse trailer with me so I could buy a buckskin horse for my wife. We asked the parents if we could pick up their horse today and take it to the funeral home, and we did. And then we took it to the commitment service and had it standing as her ashes were laid to rest. So I've had such a privileged time here in Pennsylvania, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't mean to be disjointed, but I'm just trying to, because I may not see you again, I'm just trying to give you all the things that I've seen, because people seem to have a hunger for even the most mundane things. Do I wear glasses? No, you don't. Here's an interesting thing. I asked, because I saw people of different ages, but yet there was a preponderance of people that seemed to be in their 30s. And I asked the question, how old are you in heaven? And the response was, you can be in heaven the same as you were at the happiest point you were in your life on earth. However, so that's why you saw teenagers and you saw. However, most entrants to heaven, he called them, prefer to be 32 to 33 years of age, because that is the age that Jesus died at. And every soul that enters heaven wants to emulate the Christ. Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to be 33 again. And I mentioned about 35 minutes ago this feeling of being downloaded with knowledge. And believe me, I don't have a lot of knowledge, but as the months have gone on, and I didn't share this for a long time because I felt it was too intensely personal, and I would cry so much, you know. And but I just knew that I couldn't have gone through this for no reason.
Amen.
And with Luke's guidance, and I shared for the first time with his church, and then he said, Doug Lamb would like you to come to Pennsylvania. Doug who? And so we loaded up the horse trailer and hauled an Amish horse all the way from Maine down to here. And I fallen in love with your state. But it's been an incredible journey. And sometimes at night I get this urge to get up out of bed, I'm not dreaming, and to write. And I write furiously for about 15 minutes. I don't even read it and I go back to sleep. And then the next morning I read it. And I look at it and I said, where is this coming from? And I was so nervous that it might be my imagination. So one night I confided in Luke's wife, Bonnie, who's also a pastor. And I said, Bonnie, I'm so worried that these memories I seem to be having, are they my imagination or are they part of what I felt was being downloaded to me? And Bonnie, in her wise, womanly way, said, Jen, if Jesus had revealed to you everything that he wanted you to know, you couldn't stand it.
Amen. Amen.
You couldn't stand it. And so, you know, I'm very cautious, I'm very humble, and I was not a humble man. Most airline pilots have an ego the size of Texas. Any fellow flyers in the audience? There we go. Good, good. So, you know, it's been a wonderful journey, and so far. And this week in Pennsylvania, I mean, I'd only shared twice before we came here, and we've shared about 4 times, and I'm privileged to be part of each and every one. I have to tell you something. Luke's brother-in-law, I've always been a student of the Civil War, but I've never been to Gettysburg. And so the other day we had an afternoon fairly free. And this is hard for you to believe, but I ask that you take it and believe it. And we'd gone through the cyclorama and they came out, and it was raining a little, so Grant, who was driving, said, I'll get the van and bring it around. I walked up the door, turned left, and there was a lady, about 50, 55, sitting on a bench. And as I walked by, I said, hello, and she said, hi. And I walked by and I sat down on the other bench. And I'm kind of looking down, having a moment of prayer for the souls that fell in that battle. And I became conscious of someone coming close. And I looked up and it was her. And she said, excuse me, sir, but God told me you have something to tell me. Misty from Arkansas. And I said, beg your pardon? Nope. And she said, I said, and I looked at her and she said, are you upset? I said, no, but sit down, because if I got something to tell you. And at the same time, her husband Kimball came along and sat down, and while Grant waited patiently in the car, I shared the Reader's Digest version of my experience, a condensed version. So God has been working some wonderful things in my life, and I'm so grateful.
Amen.
And I must, as I began tonight, I thank you for having me, and I thank you for listening to me.